Hey Minutes, welcome back. I'm starting off with an apology this week and an explainer. I wrote the topic for this week's video initially as two separate video scripts, but it was only after I recorded and edited the first one that I realised that this subject is far better explored in one video rather than two. But because I'm a little buried under with my day job right now, I didn't have time to re-record and edit the whole thing, so watch out for the wardrobe changes between past and present Rachel. So, without further ado, hey Minutes and welcome back. Time for a video topic I've been letting stew for a while now, and one that I hope becomes a helpful tool for you in your world building and conflict inspiration for your stories. It's a double whammy of tips this week. So, you've probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a pyramid of different aspects of life and the role they play over the course of an individual's life. I'm going to go a little bit rogue here and bastardize the entire hierarchy in a way that actually much better suits the needs of us authors. So please don't use this video as a study guide for your psychology degree or anything like that. It won't help. The theory identifies key aspects of life that are either essential for survival or contentment in life, or both. And it acts as a fantastic cheat sheet for authors. We'll go through each of the levels in more detail, starting with the first two this week, and I'm going to do some jigging about with them. So let's begin. The foundation of the hierarchy is the body's physiological needs. I call them essentials because without them, we tend to die. They're pretty self-explanatory, so I'm just going to list them off for you. Oxygen, heat, food, water, sleep, light, the ability to pee, and essentially the ability to poop. This second category can also be considered safety, whether that be physiological safety, the safety to our body, into which fall a whole bunch of threats, such as loss of limb to a lion or damage by disease. And then you also have psychological safety, emotional safety, such as not being forced to live with the threat of constant fear of your arms and legs being eaten by a lion. So that's the distinction between the first two categories: the inescapable trials of just keeping the body alive, and the more situation-dependent trials of stopping ourselves from being harmed. So those are our first two levels, but why are they important for our stories? World building purposes first. World building always needs to come first. These categories are only important because of the reality we live in. As an SFF author, though, you have the power of fantasy on your side. Do you have species that don't need to sleep to survive, or don't need to poop for some reason? You can break the rules of essential by removing some and by adding others. This is a very useful tool for creating variety in your world building. Just be sure to think through the implications of whatever you're changing. That's world building done, but there is another way that this tool can be essential for your story, and that's by providing sources of conflict. If you ever hit a slow patch in your story, then these are the easy options for you to reach for. Just be careful about when and where you use them. It's kind of hard to escalate and add in more conflict from the higher levels that we'll get into next week if you've already got readers wondering if the character will even survive in the first place, because you've already raised the stakes so high. Readers may struggle to care, so use the essentials wisely. Ebb and flow them so you leave yourself with plenty of places to go, and use different scales of threat to add variety to the conflict. Say you have a starving, dehydrated character who hasn't been able to sleep for days while suffering major constipation, a broken rib that's making breathing difficult, and to top it all off, they're being chased by that lion. This character is in a bad way, but we got that from the fact that they're starving. The other conflict is just more heaped on top, making it even less likely that they'll survive, but still hitting the same note. To hit another note with your readers, you need to make it not just about survival, but also about what state the character will be in if they do survive. Will they have lost a leg to the lion, a lung to the broken rib, some cognitive capacity because of the dehydration? The stakes here are now about more than just life or death. They are also about what form the life will be in if there is life after this situation. Thank you, Past Rachel. I'll take it from here. Onto the higher levels of Maslow's needs. But before I do, I just wanted to point out, Past Rachel, that you did an interesting video a few months back on all of the different ways food can be used as a world building tool. And I was wondering if you could maybe do other videos focused on other physiological essentials and the ways they might be adapted for world building purposes. Well, yeah, but wouldn't it be you making the videos? I mean, I'll happily take credit for them once they're done, but you're the one who's going to have to do them. You really think you're so clever, don't you? Anyway, on to the next levels. The distinction between these and the first two already discussed, and incidentally why I split the video at this point is because both of the lower levels are essential in their own way for survival, either through the keeping of the body alive or from preventing the body from being killed. But the higher levels are much more variable. We'll go into them all in a bit more detail, but if you think of the first two as fantastically useful world building and generic conflict tools, then the next are great for more characterization and bespoke conflict creation. It's essential to know who your characters are. Only by knowing what matters to them will you be able to find the right sources of conflict to test them with. And unless you've done some very clever world building with the essentials, such as by making a species that doesn't need to pee or sleep for some reason, then anything from the first two levels will be a useful weapon to wield to pick up the tension in your story. But they won't be character dependent. And if they're the only conflict sources you go to in your stories, such as by having all of your protagonists starving throughout, then all of your stories are going to start feeling samey. So how do we use Maslow's higher levels to help us? In two ways. First off, with the building of our characters, and the second part with the tearing of them down. I don't know about you, but I personally don't get on well with those character builder sheets I often find flying around Pinterest. The importance of me coming up with a childhood nickname for my characters or what they think about when they look at the night sky just never really helped with my stories. They never seemed that relevant. What did help though was understanding my character's personality and outlook. And the best way I have of doing that is by thinking of Maslow's higher levels as more of dials that can be dialed up and down. Let's go through them and demonstrate what I mean. First up, the need for connection. These are your social connectives: family, friendships, partners, colleagues, community. Each is a node with its own mini dial. So you can have a character who is all about the family and the friends, but then not at all interested in forming sexual partners or connecting with their colleagues or their local community. You can then have a character whose dials are inverted and they have no time for their family, are incredibly connected to their partner and their community. After the dials of social connection come those of esteem, the need to feel good about ourselves. This breaks down into two categories: internal validation and external validation, each of which can be further subdivided into dials for external validation of status, recognition, fame, wealth, and attention, and dials of internal validation of strength of their own character, competence, skill mastery, self-confidence, independence, and freedom. Moving to the next section, you've got the dials for cognition versus instinct. Do you have a character that needs to think things through, or do they need to act on instinct? Those are just three of some of the many examples that you can use, but these three provide a pretty solid basis for most characters. However, to make your stories more unique, you're going to need to come up with your own mystery dials. I've talked about this before, but one I like to think of for my stories is attitude towards legacy. I dial characters differently in different stories, and this gives a connection between the stories since they're all exploring different aspects of legacy, but all the characters are doing it in different ways, and I can test the characters through different types of conflict. In some stories, I have characters who need to leave a biological legacy, such as having children, others who need to leave an intellectual legacy and affect the world around them through advanced thinking of some sort, or others who need a historical legacy because they need to be remembered when they're gone. Not necessarily linked to the others, by the way. So that's how you use the model to build your characters. But what about to tear them down? Well, once you know what your character needs are, then all you need to do is orchestrate situations where your characters are forced to go against those needs. If your character needs social connection through romantic relationships, make that impossible for them. If your character needs external validation through fame, then take that fame away from them. If they're internally validated, then take away their ability to recognize their own worth. If they like to think things through, then put them in situations where they're rushed and they haven't the time to do that. If they're an instinctual person, force them into situations that slow them down. If you're struggling with your plotting and with keeping your story interesting, then this is a good tool to either figure out which ways will hit your character hardest, or why conflict situations you put them in maybe haven't landed like you'd hoped they would. So it's a useful trick, and I hope it helps. I've even put together a cheat sheet on all of this, the link to which you can find in the chat. And there is a mystery box section that I encourage you to fill out with the more unique needs that you want to explore in your stories, like the need for change versus stability, or whatever you want to pick. There's plenty that you can use, and this is why all our stories tackle such wildly different themes. So have fun with it, and I'll see you next time. Bye, my nerds!